The house at 1247 Maple Grove Lane had been a constant in Marcus Rodriguez's life, even before he officially owned it. His grandmother, Elena Rodriguez, had lived in the same modest, two-story craftsman-style home for over 4 decades, a testament to her resilience and love for the neighborhood. When she passed away 6 months ago, Marcus inherited not just the property, but a complicated legacy of memories, maintenance challenges, and an increasingly problematic swimming pool that dominated the backyard. The pool was a relic of the 1970s, installed during a time when backyard amenities were more about impressive size than practical functionality. Elena had originally commissioned its construction as a status symbol, a way to showcase the family's upward mobility after years of hard work. Back then, it was the crown jewel of summer gatherings, hosting countless family barbecues, neighborhood parties, and childhood birthday celebrations. Marcus remembered splashing around in its turquoise waters during hot summer days, watching his grandmother supervise from her favorite wicker chair, a pitcher of fresh lemonade always within reach. But time was not kind to the once magnificent pool. Years of sporadic maintenance, harsh winters, and Elena's declining health in her later years had taken their toll. Large spider web-like cracks spread across the concrete shell, the diving board was rusted and bent at an awkward angle, and the surrounding deck had begun to crumble and separate. What was once a source of joy had transformed into a potential safety hazard and a financial drain. Marcus, a 35-year-old civil engineer with a pragmatic approach to property management, saw the pool as nothing more than a liability. The annual maintenance costs were astronomical, and the structural integrity was questionable at best. Local pool maintenance companies had repeatedly advised complete replacement, with estimates ranging from $25,000 to $45,000, a sum Marcus neither wanted to spend nor could easily afford. The neighborhood itself had changed dramatically since the pool's installation. What was once a working-class area with large families and children constantly playing outside had transformed into a more professional, quieter enclave. Most homes now featured meticulously landscaped yards, with carefully curated gardens replacing the expansive, resource-intensive amenities of the past. For Marcus, removing the pool was more than just a home improvement project. It was a practical decision that aligned with his professional training in sustainable design. He envisioned transforming the backyard into a native plant garden, something that would be environmentally friendly, low maintenance, and more in tune with the current ecological understanding. Little did Marcus know that his straightforward plan would soon become a complicated battle, with his neighbor Karen Thompson emerging as an unexpected and formidable opponent. What should have been a simple demolition and landscaping project was about to become a test of patience, legal rights, and neighborhood dynamics. As he stood in the backyard, measuring tape in hand and contractor's plans spread out on a makeshift table, Marcus had no idea of the storm that was about to brew, a storm that would involve multiple community meetings, police intervention, and a neighbor who seemed more invested in his property than he was. Karen Thompson was not just any neighborhood busybody. She was a meticulously crafted embodiment of suburban micromanagement. At 62, she had lived on Maple Grove Lane for 35 years, positioning herself as the self-appointed guardian of the neighborhood's character. Her immaculate Tudor-style home, with its perfectly manicured rose gardens and symmetrical hedges, stood as a testament to her obsessive attention to detail. A retired school administrator, Karen had spent decades perfecting the art of bureaucratic manipulation. Her career had been defined by her ability to navigate complex institutional systems, a skill she now applied with remarkable intensity to neighborhood politics. Every homeowners association meeting was her stage, every community newsletter her platform, and every newcomer to the street a potential project to be molded to her precise specifications. The pool at 1247 Maple Grove Lane held a special place in Karen's elaborate narrative of neighborhood preservation. To her, it was more than just a water feature. It was a historical artifact, a symbol of the neighborhood's mid-century prosperity. She had personally attended several parties at Elena Rodriguez's house over the decades, and the pool represented a cherished memory of community gatherings that she believed were disappearing in the modern era. When Marcus first mentioned his intention to remove the pool, Karen's response was immediate and multi-pronged. She began by attempting to establish a personal connection, showing up at his doorstep with a carefully prepared plate of homemade banana bread, a peace offering that was more strategic than sincere. During this visit, she regaled Marcus with stories about his grandmother, subtly weaving in references to the pool's historical significance. "Your grandmother would never have considered removing such a beautiful feature," Karen had said, her tone simultaneously sweet and accusatory. "This pool has been part of the neighborhood's identity for decades." When personal charm failed, Karen moved to more systematic approaches. She drafted a meticulously worded petition that claimed the pool's removal would irreparably damage the historical aesthetic of Maple Grove Lane. Her document was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive language, citing nebulous concerns about property values and neighborhood character. The petition began circulating through the neighborhood's various communication channels. Karen leveraged her extensive network, the weekly bridge club, the community garden association, the local church's social committee, to gather signatures. She created a dedicated Facebook group called Save Maple Grove's Heritage, complete with old photographs of the neighborhood and dramatic posts about the potential destruction of community history. Her tactics were sophisticated. Each communication was designed to make Marcus look like an outsider, a newcomer who didn't understand the true value of the community. She strategically shared stories about Alina's long-standing presence in the neighborhood, implying that Marcus was somehow disrespecting his grandmother's memory by removing the pool. Surveillance became Karen's most potent weapon. Her living room's bay window provided a perfect vantage point of Marcus' property. She began documenting every movement, every contractor visit, every potential step towards pool removal. Detailed notes were kept in a leather-bound journal, each page a potential piece of evidence in her crusade. Local contractors began receiving mysterious phone calls questioning the legality of the potential pool removal. Karen contacted the Homeowners Association, filed preliminary complaints, and began laying the groundwork for what would become a protracted battle of wills. Marcus, initially bemused by Karen's efforts, was about to discover that her determination was far more complex and potentially dangerous than he could have imagined. What had started as a simple home improvement project was rapidly transforming into a neighborhood power struggle that would test the limits of community governance and personal property rights. The Maple Grove Homeowners Association, HOA, was about to become Marcus Rodriguez's most formidable challenge. What should have been a straightforward property modification quickly devolved into a labyrinthine nightmare of procedural obstacles, thinly veiled personal vendettas, and bureaucratic red tape. The HOA meetings, typically mundane affairs held in the community center's basement, transformed into theatrical productions whenever Marcus's pool removal came up for discussion. Karen had meticulously prepared her case, arriving with a 3-ring binder filled with historical photographs, architectural documents, and a carefully curated collection of statements from longtime residents. Marcus, an engineer accustomed to navigating complex systems, found himself completely unprepared for the level of community intrigue. The HOA board was a delicate ecosystem of retired professionals, community volunteers, and local business owners, each with their own intricate web of relationships and unspoken rules. Karen had been a board member emeritus for years, her influence extending far beyond her official capacity. The first hearing was a masterclass in bureaucratic warfare. Karen presented a compelling narrative that painted the pool as more than just a water feature. It was a community historical asset. She had enlisted the help of Harold Bennett, a local historian in his 70s, who dramatically testified about the pool's significance to the neighborhood's mid-century development. Bennett spoke of community gatherings, summer parties, and the social fabric that the pool had supposedly maintained for decades. Marcus's attempts to present a rational argument were systematically undermined. His engineering background and professional assessment of the pool's structural integrity were met with skepticism. Karen had strategically coached board members to question his expertise, suggesting that as a newcomer he couldn't possibly understand the neighborhood's deeper context. The documentation became increasingly complex. Marcus was required to submit multiple forms: a property modification request, a historical preservation review, an environmental impact statement, and a neighborhood aesthetic compliance form. Each document seemed designed to create maximum friction, with requirements that appeared deliberately obtuse. One particularly frustrating clause required a neighborhood consensus for significant property modifications. Karen had been circulating her petition, gathering signatures from residents who ranged from genuinely concerned to those simply tired of her persistent lobbying. The board began to require Marcus to attend multiple hearings, each more exhausting than the last. Financial complications emerged unexpectedly. The HOA suggested that removing the pool might trigger a review of property valuation, implying potential financial penalties. Marcus discovered hidden bylaws that seemed designed to protect historical property features, with vague language that Karen and her allies interpreted liberally. Legal consultations became Marcus's new routine. He hired a local attorney specializing in property rights, spending thousands of dollars to navigate the increasingly complex landscape. The lawyer confirmed that while the HOA had significant power, they couldn't ultimately prevent Marcus from removing a feature on his own property, but they could make the process incredibly difficult. Karen's network proved extensive. She contacted local media, suggesting a story about a heartless newcomer destroying a neighborhood landmark. Local community Facebook groups became battlegrounds of opinion, with Marcus finding himself increasingly vilified by a vocal minority of longtime residents. The emotional toll was significant. What should have been a simple home improvement project had become a full-time job of documentation, meetings, and legal maneuvering. Marcus began to understand why many homeowners simply gave up when faced with such overwhelming bureaucratic resistance. Little did he know that the bureaucratic battle was just the beginning. Karen was preparing her most aggressive move yet, a confrontation that would push the limits of legal and neighborly behavior. As weeks turned into months, Karen Thompson's tactics became increasingly aggressive and personal. Her initial bureaucratic approach gave way to more direct and intrusive methods of interference. Marcus quickly realized that this was no longer just about a swimming pool. It had become a battle of wills that threatened to consume his entire life. The first signs of escalation began subtly. Marcus noticed landscaping changes along the property line that seemed designed to create maximum inconvenience. Karen had strategically planned a row of fast-growing thorny bushes precisely where contractors would need to access the backyard. These weren't ordinary shrubs. They were carefully selected varieties with long, sharp thorns that made passage difficult and dangerous. Her surveillance intensified. Marcus discovered motion-activated cameras positioned on her property, clearly aimed at monitoring his every move. Detailed logs began appearing in his mailbox, meticulously typed documents tracking every visitor, every vehicle, every potential contractor that approached his property. The level of detail was disturbing, bordering on harassment. Communication became a weapon. Karen began flooding Marcus's email and physical mailbox with an endless stream of correspondence. Each letter was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive writing, ostensibly concerned about neighborhood safety and historical preservation, but thinly veiling a clear attempt to intimidate. She reached multiple community organizations, local officials, and seemingly anyone who might listen. Social media became her primary battlefield. A Save Maple Grove's Heritage Facebook group she had created transformed into a platform of character assassination. Old photographs of the neighborhood were interspersed with dramatic posts about Marcus's destructive intentions. Comment sections became toxic forums where longtime residents speculated about Marcus's motivations, questioning everything from his respect for community history to his personal character. Local businesses became unwitting participants in her campaign. Marcus discovered that several local contractors he contacted mysteriously became unavailable after speaking with him. When he followed up, veiled references to neighborhood concerns and potential complications suggested Karen had been making strategic phone calls. The psychological warfare reached new heights when Karen began involving Marcus's extended family. She tracked down contact information for his siblings and parents, sending them lengthy emails painting Marcus as a disrespectful grandson who was destroying his grandmother's legacy. Old family photographs were weaponized, shared in ways that suggested Marcus was betraying his family's history. Noise became another tool of harassment. Karen's landscaping work always seemed to coincide with critical moments, early morning hours when Marcus might be scheduling consultations, or precisely during times when contractors were expected to visit. Industrial-grade leaf blowers, hedge trimmers, and other loud equipment created a constant backdrop of disruption. Local community meetings transformed into theatrical performances with Karen as the lead actor. She would dramatically recount the tragedy of the potential pool removal, complete with carefully curated stories about Elena Rodriguez and the neighborhood's history. Marcus found himself cast as the villain in a narrative he never chose to be part of. Financial pressure began to mount. The constant legal consultations, the need to document and counter Karen's claims, and the increasing complexity of the pool removal process were taking a significant financial toll. Marcus estimated he had already spent thousands of dollars defending a project that should have been a simple home improvement. The most insidious aspect of Karen's campaign was its ability to create doubt. Friends and family began asking Marcus if perhaps he was being unreasonable. The constant barrage of communications, the carefully crafted narrative of community preservation, and the relentless pressure were designed to wear him down. What Karen didn't realize was that her escalating tactics were having an unintended consequence. Marcus, an engineer trained in problem-solving and strategic thinking, was becoming more determined than ever. What had started as a simple pool removal was now a matter of principle, a stand against unreasonable interference and community bullying. The Saturday morning that would change everything began like any other. The tensions had been building to a breaking point for weeks. Marcus had finally secured a reputable demolition contractor, Precision Removal Solutions, a team known for their professionalism and efficiency in handling complex property modifications. At precisely 6:45 a.m., two large white trucks with the company's logo pulled up to the property. The team leader, Jack Rodriguez, no relation to Marcus, began setting up the necessary equipment, safety barriers, demolition tools, and heavy machinery designed to carefully dismantle the aging pool. They had meticulously planned every step, obtaining all necessary permits and conducting preliminary site assessments. Karen had been preparing for this moment. Her reconnaissance was thorough. She had studied the contractor's schedule, mapped out every potential access point, and developed a multi-layered strategy of interference. As the first truck's door opened, she emerged from her house like a general preparing for battle. Dressed in a crisp white blouse and pressed khaki pants, Karen positioned herself directly in front of the pool area, arms spread wide in a deliberate blocking stance. Her smartphone was already recording, positioned to capture what she hoped would be a dramatic confrontation. A series of strategically placed lawn chairs created an additional physical barrier, forcing the contractors to navigate around her elaborate obstruction. "You will not destroy this historical landmark," Karen shouted, her voice carrying the practiced projection of a former school administrator. "I have documentation, petitions, and community support." Jack Rodriguez approached calmly, clipboard in hand, attempting to reason with her. "Ma'am, we have all the necessary permits. I'm going to have to ask you to step aside." But Karen was prepared. She began live-streaming the incident on multiple social media platforms, her narration carefully crafted to paint Marcus as a heartless developer destroying community heritage. Local community Facebook groups and neighborhood chat networks lit up with her dramatic play-by-play. Marcus, who had been coordinating with the contractors from his home office, received a series of urgent text messages. The situation was rapidly spiraling out of control. Karen had not just created a physical barrier, she had turned the pool removal into a public spectacle. Neighbors began to emerge from their houses, drawn by the commotion. Some looked concerned, others curious. A few of Karen's longtime supporters stood at their windows, watching the drama unfold. The street, usually quiet on a Saturday morning, had transformed into an unexpected theater of neighborhood conflict. Karen's live stream became increasingly dramatic. She began reciting a prepared speech about neighborhood preservation, historical significance, and community values. Her performance was calculated, each word designed to garner sympathy and support. She produced a binder of documents, waving them dramatically in front of the camera, claiming they proved the pool's historical importance. The contractors remained professional, but tension was mounting. Jack contacted the local authorities, recognizing that the situation required official intervention. Marcus, watching the live stream from his home, realized this was no longer just a simple property modification. It was a full-blown neighborhood confrontation. As the morning wore on, the standoff intensified. Karen had positioned herself as a human barrier, live streaming every moment, creating a narrative of resistance against what she portrayed as neighborhood destruction. The pool, once a symbol of community gathering, had become the focal point of a deeply personal battle of wills. Marcus knew that this moment would define not just the pool's fate, but his entire relationship with the neighborhood. The breaking point had been reached, and there was no turning back. The Maple Grove Police Department had seen its share of neighborhood disputes, but nothing quite like the scene unfolding at 1247 Maple Grove Lane. When the first patrol car arrived, officers Rachel Chen and Derek Martinez exchanged a knowing glance. This was going to be complicated. Officer Chen approached the situation with practiced calm. A 12-year veteran of the force with a background in community relations, she immediately assessed the complex dynamics at play. Karen stood her ground, smartphone still recording, while the contractors waited with a mixture of frustration and professional restraint. Marcus watched from a distance, his body language a study in controlled tension. "Ma'am, could you step aside and explain the situation?" Officer Chen asked Karen, her tone professional but firm. Karen launched into a rehearsed speech about historical preservation, community rights, and the sanctity of neighborhood traditions. She produced her meticulously organized binder, filled with documents, photographs, and what she believed was irrefutable evidence of the pool's significance. Officer Martinez began reviewing the permits Marcus had obtained. Each document was in perfect order: demolition permit, environmental clearance, homeowners association approvals. Despite the earlier complications, the contractors from Precision Removal Solutions had done their homework, ensuring every legal requirement was met. The live stream continued, with Karen providing a running commentary. "These officers are about to allow the destruction of our neighborhood's history," she narrated dramatically to her growing online audience. The Facebook group Save Maple Grove's Heritage was exploding with comments, supporters, and detractors alike weighing in real time. Officer Chen carefully examined the property line, the permits, and listened to statements from both Marcus and Karen. She was particularly struck by the contrast between Marcus's calm, factual presentation and Karen's emotional, performative approach. The officers had seen similar scenarios before: longtime residents struggling with change, newcomers asserting their property rights. "Ms. Thompson," Officer Chen finally said, "I understand your concerns, but Mr. Rodriguez has all the necessary legal documentation to proceed with the pool removal. You cannot physically prevent contractors from accessing a property where all legal requirements have been met." Karen's response was immediate and predictable. "This is harassment. I'm being discriminated against for protecting our community's heritage." Her voice rose, attracting more attention from neighbors who were now gathering at their windows and front yards. The situation reached a critical moment when Officer Martinez directly addressed Karen's blockade. "Ma'am, if you do not remove yourself from the property line, you will be cited for obstruction and potentially arrested for interfering with a legal property modification." Livestream viewers watched in real time as the drama unfolded. Karen's carefully constructed narrative was crumbling. The officers were professional, methodical, and completely uninterested in her theatrical performance. Neighboring residents began to weigh in. Some supported Karen, others were clearly embarrassed by her behavior. A few approached Marcus privately, apologizing for the disruption and expressing support for his right to modify his own property. The turning point came when Officer Chen began to explain the legal implications to Karen. She outlined the specific laws regarding property rights, demonstrating that Marcus was well within his legal bounds. The officer's measured explanation cut through Karen's emotional arguments with surgical precision. As the confrontation reached its peak, it became clear that Karen's campaign had reached its limit. The police involvement had transformed what she hoped would be a dramatic victory into a public defeat. Marcus stood quietly, a subtle smile of vindication forming at the corners of his mouth. The pool removal was going to happen. Karen's last-ditch effort had failed, and the neighborhood was about to witness a significant transformation.